I was trained earliest to be a Jungian analyst by Carl Jung. And Carl Jung once observed, he said, he was talking about this idea that within each and every one of us there is this purpose. And he said, at the same moment that you are a protagonist in your own life, that you're making choices, at the very same moment, you're also the spear carrier or the extra in a much larger drama. And he concluded that, and I've never forgotten this. He said, all of you are doomed to make choices. It sounds like such a paradox. If you're doomed, how can you be making a choice? So let me bring it into looking first at your own body. And you heard the doctor speaking before about your bodies, and so much of what he was saying I align with and relate to. Our bodies are what we are given to live out this incarnation, this time on this planet. I happen to be given a male body that's about 6'2", and it has the hair that used to grow on its head and now grows in its ears, and all of these things. There's like this is what I was doomed to. I mean, I'm not going to be in a female body. I'm not going to be in a body that has brown eyes when I have blue eyes, and so on. So in a sense, you are given this body, but you also have choices to make. And the choices that you make within this sense of being doomed, which is what he meant when he said you're a protagonist in your own life, but you're also a spear carrier in a much larger drama. That there is something bigger moving all of these pieces around. And this thing that is bigger, that's moving the pieces around, is something that you have to align with. And you can align with it in your body by treating it well, by feeding it the applause line, real food, by exercising, by watching how you relate to this body. You can make a huge difference, but you're still in this context of being doomed to make choices. Now look at the rest of your life. All of the things that brought you to this place, to this day, right here in your life. And most of us have come into this, into this place where we don't recognize this fundamental truth that within each and every one of us, there is this this capacity that I have in one of my most recent books called Wishes Fulfilled. I call it the I am discourses. The word I am. See, if you want to be able to change something about yourself or to align yourself with this divine mission in which you say, yes, I have been doomed to do all of these things, but there are choices that I can make. One of the things that I have learned is that there is always something bigger moving the pieces around, even when we think that we're the one who are making the choices. Carl Jung once said that at the same moment that you are making choices in your life, you are also the spear carrier or the extra in a much larger drama. And he said, in effect, we are all doomed to make choices. You see the paradox. We're doomed. We're not doing anything. We're all just being done. And yet within that larger context of being done, we're also making choices. But it really boils down to a realization that who we are, who each and every one of us, our essence is not this body that we're in and these physical choices that we're making. I ask my audiences frequently, how many bodies have you been in since you incarnated into this planet on this lifetime? Because
One of the great teachers and sages of my life, a man named Muktananda in India, was asked the question, what is real? Swami, what is real? And he said, that is real, which never changes. So anything that is changing doesn't meet the definition of being real. So who are you? What part of you meets that definition? Certainly not that body that you're in. We've all been in so many bodies since we showed up. We were all in a little body about this big that weighed 7 or 8 or 9 pounds. And we were all in a body that was this big, a little toddler, and a teenage body, and a 20-year-old body, and for some, a body that has gone on. They've been in many bodies up and through the 70s and 80s, like myself, 71 years of age. And if you think that body that you are in is real, then you must have thought that about your 10-year-old body as well. So I invite you to go out and bring that 10-year-old body in here, and we'll talk to it. And you smirk and laugh and so on because you realize that that's impossible, because it's not real. It doesn't exist, does it? And the same is true of the body that you walked into this beautiful church here in Assisi tonight. It will be different when you walk out. You'll walk out of here with a different body than you walked in with. So that by that definition, this is all just an illusion. It's just constantly changing, and therefore it isn't real. But there is a part of each and every one of us that can remember being in that 10-year-old body, and that observed it and noticed it. And that you can close your eyes and be there. You can do everything you did when you were 10 or 12 or 20 or 30 or whatever. And so it is to that element of your consciousness, of your awareness, of your reality that I address these remarks. Not the body, not our physical possessions, but our soul, our spirit, our divine mind, whatever we call it. It is to that is the only thing that is real. And when we learn to live from there, from that place, I call it the higher place, the higher self, or the highest self. The part of us that realizes that all of us, the poet T.S. Eliot said that we shall not cease from exploration. But at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated, but to know it for the first time. The poet spoke of death. I don't. I believe we can return to that place from which we originated. Call it the Tao, call it God, call it soul, and come to know it. And as my awareness of the man who this city brought up and is honored by his presence, he was actually known as God's buffoon, God's fool. Wherever he would go, he would be mocked. And he was really trying to teach all of us to let go of our attachment to our possessions, to our bodies, to who we are. In fact, he believed that the only way you can get closer to God was to remove all of your attachments to your stuff, to what you own, and instead come from a place of pure and divine love. And this gathering here for this miraculous journey that we're all on began as an idea. I think it was my idea, but I know that something bigger is always moving the pieces around. And I'm always aware that even though I think that it's me making the choices, I also know that I'm also the spear carrier or the extra.
Once you're in that state of God realization, you'll understand things like your intuition. That is that inner calling that says, go this way instead of that way. Try this. Don't be afraid of that. Get rid of the fears that are so dominating your life. As Anita talks about fear and what a thing it was that created the cancer in her life, which allowed her to almost come to a place of dying. You'll discover things like synchronicity, that you have a thought and all of a sudden what you place your attention on begins to manifest and arrive in your life. You'll discover that those thoughts are not just things that are happenstance. There's no happenstance in this entire universe. It's all held together by a divine light. And one of my favorite readings I'd like to share with you is from the life and teachings of the masters of the Far East. It said, it has been clearly stated that life lived by the average individual is hypnotic. That is, the majority of men and women are not living life as it was intended at all. Not 1 in a million feels the freedom to live what he inwardly feels he should live. He has come under the world's opinion of himself, and this opinion is what he obeys rather than the laws of his own being. In this respect, and to this degree, he is living under an hypnotic spell. It's like hypnosis. He lives under the delusion that he is a mere human being living in a merely material world and only hopes to escape it when he dies and goes to what he calls heaven. This is not the determination intended in the plan and purpose of life. Obedience to one's inner nature, the expression of life as he instinctively feels it ought to be expressed, is the very foundation of the life which the masters reveal as the only true mode of living. That is very powerful awareness, that you are not this body that you're in, this body that comes and goes. You are the invisible divine intelligence within, the same intelligence that allows a clay pot to exist. And finally, from the Masters of the Far East, the second volume, the moment you become free from the belief that you are mere human beings, subject to human laws of life and death and the limitations which human beings have imposed, that moment you will see that you are free from all human limitations and may become sons of God, if you will. The moment you realize that you are divine, that you are free from all limitations and possessed of the strength of divinity, and you know that this divinity is the place where being comes most directly in contact with God, man is then beginning to see and know that this divinity is not something to be injected into each other from without. He is beginning to know that it is the very life of each and every person, your essence, the light within you. This is what this course is about. This is a course that we go deeply in depth in, and the reason that I put the course together in the first place is because I have heard nothing but positive, enlightening comments from people who say, it turned my life around. I finally went within and discovered that I am capable of using this divine intelligence that we call light inside of us to create the life that I was destined to live.
The next principle is called treasuring your divinity. Treasuring your divinity. There's a wonderful observation that I saw from Emerson in Self-Reliance. It's about trusting your divinity, knowing that you are connected to your source, knowing that you are a divine creation and that there are no accidents. He said a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his own thought, because it's his own. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. We often reject our thoughts, and we see the things that we think of as grand and as genius, and we reject them because they're our own. treasuring our divinity instead of being terrified of it, knowing that I am always connected to my source. There is no way that I cannot, because it is in you, and I am in you, and you are in me, and you can never be separated from it. There is no place that this source is not. It grows everybody's fingernails. It beats everybody's hearts. It digests everybody's foods. It opens all the flowers, and you're always connected to it. I was reading a book that was sent to me by a friend in England. It was written by Rashad Field. It was part of a trilogy, and it was the middle book of a trilogy. It was called To Know We Are Loved. And I was reading that book, and I came across about 4 lines that just intrigued me so much. I was reading them over and over and over again. And this is what they said. I made it the display quote for this book. It said, he was talking to someone who was very close to dying. And he said, if we stop for a moment, it is possible to perceive a pattern in our lives. The motivators that have influenced us become much more obvious. We are able to see life unfolding from both ends at once, coming into the present moment. But until we get to a certain point of realization, this is not possible, because everything is still seen as a series of apparent causes and effects. That you have to be able to get to a place in your life where you can step back and realize that there are really 2 kinds of time. One of the kinds of time is what I call horizontal time, or cause and effect time, or the scientists call chronos time, chronological time. This happens, and then this happens, and this causes this, and this is the cause and effect. And we have a tendency in our lives, as we look at all of the things that happen to us in our lives, to believe that everything has a cause and effect relationship. And so the reason that I am here today is because of all the things that I have done, all the choices that I have made, and they have led me to this place. But then there's another kind of time. And this is a kind of time that is called eternal time. And this is a line that doesn't go horizontal, it goes vertical. It goes straight up to our source of being, to the place that we come from. And this line is a kind of time that is deathless, and is birthless, and is eternal, and it is always there. And when you get to a place in your life where you cross that line, when you see the place where horizontal time and vertical time cross, you have this realization that me, this personal me, this ego of mine, is not the thing that's making all of the choices, that there's something else that is involved. I called my publisher, and I said to him, I want to step back. I want to step back from my life, because I know that there have been forces or powers or some kind of energy that has been impacting me throughout my entire life. And I've been able to step back. And as it says in this quotation, it's so important to realize that everything isn't just coming from the past. There are things that are coming from the future and as well, that we're always pulling out. It's like, I just talked to someone who has a little baby. The little baby's just a few months old. And I said, you realize that little baby's wisdom teeth are already there. They're not going to come out of the past. They're already there. We're going to pull them out of the future. They're not going to show up for another 20 years or so, and that there are going to be choices to be made at that time. What do you do with them? Do you leave them in? Do you cut them out? All kinds of things. But there is this sense that not only is there a chronological cause and effect time taking place, but there's this eternal time in which everything about, for example, our entire physical being has already been handled for us. You know, it's like what your height is going to be, and what the color of your skin is going to be, what the color of your eyes are going to be, and when your hair is going to fall out. I know the experience very well. So what I decided to do was to take a look at what were the circumstances and the people and the events and the things that kept showing up in my life
going all the way back to the time that I was just a little baby, all the way up to just recently at the age of 73, which is the age I am now as we record this show. Something took a hold of me and said, write this. And I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, just because there was something that was pulling me in the direction of this is something that I absolutely had to do. And I started to realize that that's really the story of my entire life. And it's the story of all the rest of our lives as well.
In the time I have left, I want to talk to you about walking down another street. And this other street is a street in which you have an awareness that not only do you have a physical body, but you have come to believe that this physical body is who you are, and that you have locked yourself into these five senses and decided that whatever evidence they provide for you is how you identify and define your reality. By what I see, by what I hear, by what I smell, by life what looks like, by how much money I have, by the stuff that I possess. And this is the world of the ego. And this is the world of the false self, according to my teacher, Nisargadatta Maharaj in India, who passed away in 1986. The false self is the ego. The ego is the part of us that has come to believe that who I am is defined by these six things. Who I am is what I have. And so we spend a big hunk of our life attempting to get as much stuff as we possibly can. The Tao teaches something very different. Let go of everything you have. When I moved to Maui in 2005 full-time, I gave up everything that I owned. Everything. 20,000 books, all of my photographs, records of every description, furniture, all the things in the house, all my clothing, shoes, was all donated to people who lived on underneath a bypass in Florida. And let go of all of it. So the ego teaches us you are what you have. The Tao teaches us let go of everything that you have. Do less and accomplish more. One of Lao Tzu's most famous observations was, I do nothing and leave nothing undone. My son has taken to becoming a spiritual Taoist. Every time I tell him to do something, he says, I do nothing. And I leave nothing undone. But there's much wisdom in that. I could go on into that. The second thing that the ego teaches us is that who I am is not only what I have, but who I am is what I do, what I accomplish. And so we spend a big hunk of our lives believing that the way that we become, quote, successful, happy, fulfilled, self-actualized, whatever it might be, is on the basis of what I accomplish, what my resume looks like, how many promotions I get. And so we send our children off to school and we ask them to learn to identify themselves on how much they get and what they accomplish. Your grades become more important than what it is that you are studying. What you own, what clothes you wear, what labels you have, and so on. And we become obsessed with this kind of absurdity. And this is the false self at work. The third thing that the ego teaches us is that I am what other people think of me. I am my reputation. So becoming obsessed with our reviews, what people think of us, other people's opinions, getting the approval of others. We talk about peer group approval needs and so on. I have 8 children that aren't concerned about those things. They were never raised with that kind of a mentality. The whole idea of, trying to please other people was something that they consistently heard from their mother and myself, that this isn't important to us. We're not attached to that.
and this kind of an attachment. So the Tao teaches us that what you think of me is none of my business. What the ego teaches us is that what you think of me is the most important thing that I have, and so I'll do whatever it is that I need to do in order to get you to agree with me, to like me, to approve of me, and so on. The fourth thing that the ego teaches us, this false self, is that who I am is separate from everyone else. And so we are raised in this world of the false self, which teaches us that we have to be in competition with everyone else. We have to defeat someone else. Being number one is the most important thing, and you see people doing this all the time at football games and you'll see it when the Olympics come up, that the gold medal is more important than anything else. And you'll see people weeping and sobbing over this idea that I have to be better than somebody else in order to be fulfilled in my life. The fifth thing that the ego teaches us is that I am separate not only from everybody else, but that I am separate from what's missing in my life. The Tao teaches us that there is no place that God is not. If there is no place that God is not, then God must be in you. And if there is no place that God is not, then God must also be in all that I perceive to be missing from my life. And therefore, in order to become a manifester and to attract into my life what I want, I simply have to realign myself. I have to rejoin. I have to yoga myself to God. And the most egregious error of the ego is a belief system that says that who I am is separate from God, that God is something outside of me. We have not been raised to understand and believe that at our basic core, what Lao Tzu called our original nature, what we are is love. And all we have to do is be that and live that. There was a great Indian poet. His name was Rabindranath Tagore. And he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913 for a collection of poetry called the Gitanjali. And in that poem, that long poem, 90-some verses, one of those verses says this. He's speaking of the ego. He said, I went out alone on my way to my tryst. But who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company. That's a great poet. And that's a great piece of truth. That in order to get to this place, I speak about, that Maslow spoke to me about and trained me to think about, called self-actualization, is that we have to stop evaluating who we are on the basis of those ego identifiers, and instead begin to see ourselves as divine love.
We live in a celebrity-obsessed world, don't we? Look at me. Notice me. The Tao teaches something completely the opposite. Listen to the 66th verse of the Tao. Water again. The sea stays low. And because the sea stays low, all of the rivers and all of the streams empty into it. Because it stays humble. Because it stays in that place of just allowing everything to come to you. He was trying to teach us the important lesson of letting what we know is coming come to us. I practice this so much more now in my life than I did at one time. I can remember years ago, I had written a book called Your Erroneous Zones back in the 70s, and it stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for something like 27 months. And many weeks it would be number 1, and then it would go down to number 3, and then it would go to number 2, and down to 7, and all of that. And I was doing The Tonight Show in those days on a regular basis, and so many of the other shows, Merv Griffin and Phil Donahue and Dinah Shore. I became like a regular on the Dinah Shore. I was like, hobnobbing with Burt Lancaster folks, and what you do is you call and find out where you appear on the bestseller list for the following week on Wednesday. You call up on Wednesday, not for the Sunday coming up, but for the following week. And I called home, and my ego was pretty strong, and I was very much into a lot of notice me. I really believe that true nobility is not about being better than anyone else now. It's about being better than you used to be. And I think I'm better than I used to be. And I know that I'm better than I used to be in every quality or every characteristic that I hold to be valuable. But in those days, I was into notice me. And I called home, and I had trained my wife to call the New York Times. She had this special number that she could call, and with a certain code, and she could find out where I was going to appear on the bestseller list the following week. So I called her up and I said, where am I on the bestseller list next week? I was out in California doing something, and she said, you're not on the bestseller list. I said, what are you talking about? I was number 1 on the bestseller list last week. I said, even my voice changed when I said, what do you mean I'm not on the bestseller list? She said, you're not on the bestseller list. I'm sorry. She said, your book is on the bestseller list. Big distinction there, isn't it? Between believing that this is me and recognizing that you can let go a little bit of that. Listen to verse 66 of the Tao. Why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Humility gives it its power. That's a very important principle to understand. And I live on the ocean, right next to it. It's my front yard. And always I watch it to learn something from this thing called the ocean, which is the most powerful source of life that we have on the planet. Without it, there's no life on this planet. And because it stays low, so what does this have to say to us? Do you have the capacity to get past that ego need to always be saying, notice me, look how important I am? There's been a proliferation of this lately with this celebrity silly stuff, isn't it? CNN is doing, full hour shows on silly little things about what happened to this particular celebrity or what happened to that celebrity, and the celebrity's never even done anything. And there's all of this talk about, and all of the new magazines. And you go into an airport and you look on the newsstand, and all the same photos, just with different magazines. I don't even know what the names of all of them are, but there's like this huge market now that we have for people to get into a state of notice me, notice me, notice me. And how much do we train our young people, particularly in our schools and so on, that the one who is the star is the one who gets the most attention. The one who is the most important and the most valuable is the one that has the most people liking them, and so on. This constant obsession with needing to be noticed, when in fact, what I have found for myself is the happiest moments of my life are when I can do it low and slow and not have anybody out there even know what I'm doing. To be able to, Louise never would have advertised the fact
of some of the things I talk about with her generosity. She does it anonymously. It's almost always done in those ways. No, look at me, look and notice me, how important I am, and so on. So much to learn from that kind of wisdom, from that kind of inner connection to the Tao, the ability and the willingness to say, to do it anonymously, to say that you can just get done almost anything that you want to get done if you don't become obsessed with taking credit for it. Remember the movie The Magnificent Obsession? The movie made back, I think, in the 50s. And it was really about what was the magnificent obsession. It was the ability to be able to give anonymously. What is Alcoholics Anonymous? It is everybody stays anonymous. Nobody has a title. There's not even anybody in charge. There's nobody, there's no leaders of this. There's no president. There's no vice president. There's no organization. It's just, here's a group of people who just want to help other people whose lives are out of control. So here's a meeting place, and you come, and one day somebody will chair it, and then somebody else another day will chair it. And one of the things I've found when I attend one of these meetings is that I feel you'll see so many people who are downtrodden, who feel as if their life has passed them by, who look like they don't have any teeth, they haven't shaved, they're dirty, they're God in disguise. Mother Teresa was asked the question about what she does when she was in Calcutta, and she said, every day, I see Jesus Christ in all of his distressing disguises. All of his distressing disguises. That you can see this source, you can see the Tao, you can see it when, particularly in those who are the most obscure, the most isolated from everyone else. And whenever I go to one of those meetings and I hear people get up and they tell their stories, I feel there's so much presence of the source, of God, of spirit, of Lao Tzu, of the sort of Tao, whatever you want to call it, in one of those meetings than I've ever felt in any church. I've never felt the presence of it more. And I encourage you, any of you watching this right now, go to one of those meetings. You don't have to be an alcoholic. You don't have to. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't call myself an alcoholic. I was never out of control. I drank, but I wasn't out of control. And but I still go to those meetings. I have people in my own family that have struggled with addiction, and I go with them, and I sit there and I listen to those stories, and I get shivers down my back when I think about how beautiful it is to be in the presence of people. All they want to do is help each other. There's a movie called My Name is Bill W. James Woods played, and James Garner is in it. And his life just got totally out of control with addictions, totally out of control. And then he went to he went to one of these meetings, and he began to realize, and he said, we can actually take these people, and all we have to do is love them. All we have to do is, and he's so excited about the concept of being able to go out there and offer it. And I keep referring to Louise because she's such a hero to me. There was a time back in the 80s when our president wasn't even able to say the word AIDS, was he? I mean, come on. And here was this lady who, before this thing became the worldwide phenomenon that it is, was having meetings in her own house and going and bringing these people, these downtrodden people who had been labeled outcasts in society, and offering them a place to learn how to love each other and to care for each other. This was long before there was any celebrity status associated with trying to end this horrible crisis that our country has and our world has had. There was James Wood, so excited about the idea of we can create a place where we're anonymous. Nobody has to know anything about us. We don't have to say our names. We don't have to say anything. We just have to come there and we can help each other. And before that happened, everybody who got out of control with addictions, particularly with alcohol, would die. There was no cure. There was no cure. And where did they find their cure? They found it in being anonymous. They found it in being obscure. They found it in having no organization. They found it in having no elected representative. They found it in having no rules. There are no rules. You just come and we care. If you've been 1 day or 1 hour sober, or even if you're drunk, you come. We care about you. And you are not that alcohol. Who you are is this divine soul. In the 36th verse of the Tao Te Ching, it says, "The gentle outlast the strong. The obscure outlast the obvious." Try to become a little more obscure, a little less interfering, a little less notice me, a little less, one of the specific kinds of things that you can do is just as you're about, when somebody else is talking, just as you're about to interject what you've been thinking about for the whole time, waiting for them to stop talking, just to stop and to bite your tongue and say, "Tell me more." Or, "That's very interesting. I have never heard that point of view before." Even if they totally, completely disagree with everything that you stand for, to be willing to listen, to be able to stop. Practice it. I practiced it when I did these verses of the Tao. I practiced it every single day while I was working on that. Just staying obscure. And for me, that's not always so easy because of just being recognized wherever I go. And if I saw someone who was about to recognize me, I would just put my head down. I would just walk a little bit past them like I'm saying, right now, I just want to be anonymous. Right now, I want to be obscure. The Tao says, storms always end. Verse 23, fierce winds don't blow all morning. A downpour of rain doesn't last all day. Who does this? Heaven and earth. You're already connected to everything you want or need. It will come to you at the exact perfect time, as the rivers and the streams come to the ocean at the perfect time and place. You gotta trust. You gotta know it's going to come to you. You don't have to chase after it. You can become a little less obsessed with your ego and your self-importance and who you are and what you've done, and you can get so much more done. And you know what? It's the most peaceful and sweet, delicious way. It's like the song that Cecilia was singing about the rose. There's a law in the universe. I call it the law of attraction. And the law of attraction is one that works like this. You get back from the universe, from the world, what it is that you put out there in the world. And if you're putting out there into the world that I am not worthy of attracting something beautiful into my life, that the universe will respond back to you with exactly that message. And the even more interesting part about this, you can't give away what you don't have principle, is that if your message to the universe is gimme, 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 which is a lot of people's message to the universe. I want this from you, I want that from you, please give me this, I have to have that. The universe's response back to that kind of a mentality is exactly the same. The universe will say right back to you over and over again, gimme, gimme, gimme. And you'll find yourself never ever arriving, but always being in a state of striving, always feeling as if you're being neglected, never feeling as if you have enough, always feeling as if you're being shortchanged, because you're constantly under the pressure to give, to get back what the universe is demanding from you. The irony of this is that if you shift that and you say to the universe, to the world, how may I serve? How may I serve? The universe's response back to you is, how may I serve you? How may I serve you? And it's very intriguing. When you take your energy and your attention off of what you are demanding from the world, and instead saying, what can I give to the world? And it's really the basis behind that very famous line of the President John Kennedy's inaugural address. Ask not what your country can do, ask what you can do for your country. And the irony of that is, and I've learned that in my own life, that when I stopped thinking about what was in it for Wayne Dyer and how much could I get, and I began to shift and say, how can I help you? How can I give to you? What can I do for you? And people who write to me, I send them something. When I encounter somebody that needs help of some kind, I'm very often just giving that to them. And then I find that it just keeps coming back into my life. And once I shifted that energy off of what can I have into what can I give, it seemed to me that the universe responded back with the very same message. What can I give to you? And the most incredible and wonderful and beautiful abundance has flowed into my life in every way that I can possibly think of. You can't give away what you don't have. So take a look at an inventory of what you do have. How much do you love yourself? How much kindness do you have in you? How much peace do you have in you? How much joy do you have in you? And if you're able to give that away as many times as you can in a given day, watch and see how much more of that continues to show up and come back in your life.